The cinematic industry is one that is built on making our wildest imagination reality. But of course, there has to be some trickery along the way to make the impossible very possible. So of course, sometimes our brains end up paying the price. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are movies that totally tricked your brain. Dr. No. Though the James Bond films are recognized today as some of Hollywood's glossiest productions, back at the franchise's inception, things weren't quite so fancy. The first Bond film ever, 1962's Dr. No, was produced on a svelte budget of just $1.1 million, and because legendary production designer Ken Adam was given just £14,500 to dress the sets, he had to get pretty creative. While you'd never know by simply looking at it, the iconic aquarium on the wall of his lair is actually an ingenious fake. It's nothing more than a video being projected against a screen and cleverly lit to replicate the luminance of a real aquarium. Hilariously though, because Adam only had the budget to buy stock footage of smaller fish, he had to blow up the footage to make the fish look larger. In order to explain this effect to an audience who probably didn't notice anyway, Dr. No even says to 007 in the film, the glass is convex, 10 inches thick, which accounts for the magnifying effect. It did give us the legendary follow-up line from Bond though, minnows pretending they are whales, just like you on this island, Dr. No. Ouch.
Have you ever wanted to watch your favourite content whilst you're abroad and stay safe online? Well, we have an incredible deal for you. For just $2.50 a month, you can get Norton VPN, an easy-to-use VPN that won't slow you down, allows you to watch your favourite shows from around the world, and keeps your online activity safe and private, all with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just scan the QR code on screen right now or use the link in the description to get Norton VPN for just $2.50 a month. Now, back to the video.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood received strong reviews from critics, though as indicated by the film's slightly underwhelming B cinema score, some audience members felt they'd been misled by the movie's marketing. Given that the movie trailers featured extensive glimpses of Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate and lingered on shots of Charles Manson, there was a fairly reasonable expectation that the film would, at least in part, dramatize the infamous Tate murders. But of course, Tarantino's knack for revising history caused him to actually reinvent that fateful night and shift the focus away from Tate altogether. Those expecting either a grisly exploitation-style depiction of the Tate murders or a subversive finale where Tate teams up with Bruce Lee to destroy the attackers were left baffled by what they actually got. Instead, Tate is barely a character in the movie at all, having precious few lines, and in a deliberate move by Tarantino, is generally shown doing fairly mundane, ordinary things. Similarly, Manson has just a few seconds of screen time in the entire 161-minute movie. Action-wise, the finale instead sees Tate's neighbor Rick Dalton and his stuntman pal Cliff Booth take out the murderous trash while Tate is safely hanging with her pals next door.
The Exorcist. William Friedkin's The Exorcist is one of the greatest and most unnerving horror films, and say it with me kids, of all time! In a large part due to the anxiety-inducing atmosphere that the director was able to generate. It's well documented that Friedkin included subliminal imagery throughout the film, namely brief flashes of Demon Pazuzu's terrifying face to keep the audience thrown off kilter, but he also employed more subtle techniques to get the hairs standing right up on viewers' necks. In many of the film's earlier scenes, Friedkin integrated the sly sound of buzzing bees in order to indicate a primal fear response in the viewer's lizard brain. You may feel uncomfortable during these scenes, but never really know why. Friedkin claimed that he also added disturbing industrial sounds into the soundscape of the demon scenes in an attempt to trigger audience members' fight or flight response and make them feel a sense of impending danger. As much as viewers might take umbrage with a filmmaker toying with their subconscious in such a way, it's undeniably genius-level cinematic manipulation.
Terminator Dark Fate, presented to fans as a return to form for a series that's been on the skids for at least a decade, Dark Fate saw James Cameron returning to the series in a story and producer capacity, with Deadpool director Tim Miller taking the reins and both Arnie and Linda Hamilton co-starring. And though Dark Fate is technically a sequel to Terminator 2, the movie's marketing concealed from audiences its disturbing central conceit, that it actually rewrites franchise history in its opening 5 minutes, with a controversial twist which left many fans infuriated. The rest of the movie leaps off to become a quasi-remake of the first 2 films, starring young new cast members who can potentially carry the franchise onward, while Schwarzenegger and Hamilton are really only in it for the sake of appearances, though Hamilton is still the best thing in it. There is a single narrative trick that actually works for the better though, and that's the eventual reveal that the new Terminator target Danny isn't merely Sarah Connor 2.0, but rather John Connor 2.0, the future Resistance leader herself. Ultimately though, the deception in the trailers didn't work out, as Dark Fate immediately sank like a stone at the box office.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of the most technically astonishing movies ever made. Its groundbreaking hybrid of live-action filmmaking and 2D animation winning it both the Best Visual Effects Oscar and a Special Achievement Academy Award. While we as audience members of course know that Roger Rabbit and the other toons aren't in any way real, director Robert Zemeckis ingeniously tricks our minds into fully accepting the illusion through an innovative technique called bumping the lamp. Now in this context, bumping the lamp is the act of manipulating the physical environment of a scene in order to sell the presence of the cartoon character, who is of course added during post-production. Zemeckis and his crew went to exhaustive lengths to execute the results of the toon's physical movements in camera, using elaborate rigging to have every non-animated element be part of the live-action shoot. The term bumping the lamp was coined from the scene in which Eddie bumps his head on the lamp, causing light to shine all around the room while Eddie interacts with Roger. Because the ever-shifting lighting is also applied to Roger himself, audience members subconsciously believe that Roger is real, rather than being distracted by him not blending in correctly with the environment. Between this and the tireless efforts to carry out his actions in camera, such as having the weight of boxes shift when he sits on them, it's truly next-level filmmaking that absolutely should have earned Zemeckis a Best Director Oscar nomination.
Avengers Endgame. As you'll see throughout this list, the MCU has mastered the art of misleading audiences in a way that's actually satisfying and entertaining, rather than trying to deceive viewers because they know they've got a dud on their hands. And no MCU movie has done it better than Avengers Endgame, a film rightly shrouded in secrecy in the lead up to its release, and one which Marvel Studios expertly marketed to avoid revealing specific spoilers or even the basic context. For starters, who would have predicted that Thanos would actually die in the first 20 minutes of the movie? Given that the trailers focused on showing the second Thanos who travels through time from 2014, seeing the Mad Titan's head parted from his body by Thor early on was a genuinely shocking moment. Speaking of Thor, his entire physical transformation was cleverly obscured in the trailers, with his presence even being digitally removed from certain shots to retain the surprise. And given that just about everyone expected Captain Marvel to show up and categorically save the day by herself, it was refreshing to see her largely kept on the sidelines, save for a few cool marquee moments, allowing the OG Avengers to hog the limelight one last time.
Eyes Wide Shut. Compositing is one of the toughest effects-based disciplines to pull off correctly. Placing an actor in an environment that they weren't actually present in is extremely difficult because perfectly matching the lighting and general conditions of the original footage is incredibly challenging. Also, our brains are extremely good at picking up things like poorly matched lighting. I mean, we immediately know if something's off if it's not consistent. But ever the perfectionist, Stanley Kubrick went the old-fashioned rear projection route on his final film Eyes Wide Shut. Because Kubrick feared flying and consequently shot his films in the UK, he had to have the film's Manhattan setting precisely recreated on a London soundstage. Yet for the shot where Cruise's protagonist Bill walks down the New York streets, Cruise was actually just walking on a treadmill in front of a rear projection. Because both the dynamic lighting and the speed of the camera's movement were matched so perfectly to Cruise, the overwhelming majority of audiences had no idea they were looking at two elements being combined together. As frustrating as Kubrick's obsessive eye for detail must have been for his cast, it also meant that the risky technical aspects of the production were expertly controlled down to the most minute degree.
Serenity's insane plot twist threw everyone off. On paper, Serenity seemed like a sure recipe for success. Helmed by acclaimed filmmaker Stephen Knight, while also casting Matthew McConaughey opposite Anne Hathaway, a dishy genre thriller was surely on the cards. But then Serenity actually hit cinemas, and the film was something very different altogether. This movie is destined to be remembered only for its certifiably insane plot twist, where it's revealed that the central narrative is actually a video game created by the grieving son of McConaughey's real-life equivalent, who happens to be dead. Clearly, the studio know that even hinting at the twist could sway audiences away, and while the execution of said twist is terrible, it at least makes Serenity a more interesting film than had it merely been a B-grade thriller from A-list talents. Whether you dug the twist or not, it's fair to say that everyone going into the film was fooled.
Star Wars: A New Hope. The original Star Wars is such an impressive technical achievement that audiences are liable to believe that just about everything fantastical that they're watching is a complex, expensive visual effect. Case in point, the side-on wide shots of Luke Skywalker driving through Tatooine in a speeder appears to the naked eye to have been achieved by painting out the wheels on the bottom of a prop vehicle, right? But George Lucas actually had an elegantly practical solution, which involved placing a long mirror in front of the wheels to reflect the dusty environment and imply the vehicle was indeed levitating off the ground. To ensure the end result looks seamless, Vaseline was also rubbed over a camera lens filter to provide a slight blur to the speeder's base, which the crew later nicknamed the Force Field.
John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. Unlike some of the aforementioned examples, John Wick Chapter 3 undeniably tricked fans in the most uproariously entertaining way. Marketed and talked up as the final entry in the John Wick franchise, the film ultimately defies this to end on yet another tantalizing cliffhanger, setting up the mother of all battles, John Wick Chapter 4. Though it seemed that the third film would end with the titular assassin either dying or finding a way to finally escape this life, it instead finds a third option, sending John on the run once again as he seeks to team up with the Bowery King for all-out war in number 4.
Irreversible. So Gaspar Noé's 2002 thriller Irreversible is not a film for the faint of stomach, to be blunt. It depicts brutal murder and sexual violence in extremely confronting matter-of-fact fashion, and because that apparently isn't off-putting enough, the director also decided to employ some sneaky tricks to further mess with your brain. For the movie's infamous nightclub sequence, the director piped in an extremely low-frequency noise into the film's sound mix, which creates a feeling of anxiety and even nausea in viewers, placing a dizzying cherry on the top of what is a willfully unpleasant experience. Apparently, the low-frequency sound is also the same one that police use to stop riots. You can't hear it, but it makes you shake, and in a good theatre with a subwoofer, it's going to have a bit of an effect on you. This is likely why Irreversible's infamous premiere saw 250 audience members reportedly walk out, while 20 viewers fainted and required oxygen from emergency services. Woof.
Captain Marvel's explanation for Nick Fury's destroyed eye. Though Captain Marvel was mostly the origin story fans expected, it did have a few surprise aces up its sleeve. First and foremost, just about everyone expected the film to reveal that Nick Fury was blinded in one eye due to some skull-related skullduggery. Dare I say, scrollduggery? Only for it to be revealed that his ocular injury was in fact caused by being scratched in the face by Goose, an alien taking the form of a cute cat. Though it left some fans genuinely mad that Fury's hyped up injury ultimately had such a hilariously benign cause, Fury's subsequent decision to play up the legend and keep the real culprit a secret deepens and humanizes his character in its own playful way. But far more surprising than that was the actual real twist, that Skrull antagonist Talos wasn't actually the villain at all. The Skrulls were simply trying to find a new place to live, while the Kree were the real villains.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day. As Star Wars: A New Hope proved, mirrors can be an invaluable tool in elegantly tricking audiences' brain into believing an illusion, but James Cameron took that to a whole new level in his technological landmark Terminator 2. The film's director's cut features inarguably one of the greatest deleted scenes ever made, where John and Sarah reset the T-800 CPU from read-only to read-write, allowing it to become a learning computer. The sequence takes place in front of a mirror, with Cameron even panning directly across the mirror, yet somehow not capturing the film crew in the shot. This was actually achieved through a masterful use of doubles, because the mirror isn't actually a mirror at all, but actually another part of the set. You see, Linda Hamilton's twin sister Leslie doubles as Sarah on the other side of the mirror, while the T-800 in the foreground is a prop whose face we never see, while Schwarzenegger is actually sat in the mirror section. The trickiness, of course, lies in perfectly syncing up the movements of both sides, especially with a moving camera where shifting planes of movement could make it far easier for viewers to notice the seams. And yet, the end result is so meticulously executed that most audiences would simply assume the mirror was just another of the film's many brilliant, complex visual effects.
Glass was a depressing anti-superhero movie. Split's tantalizing final scene hyped up Glass as an epic three-way superhero showdown between David Dunn, the Horde, and Mr. Glass. But Shyamalan ultimately had other ideas. Hilariously, the teased final battle at a skyscraper is nothing more than a red herring, and the real final fight between Dunn and the Horde simply takes place in a bland parking lot. That subversive twist on the superhero formula wasn't the problem, but the decision to kill all three superpowered characters in mostly underwhelming ways sure was. Mr. Glass having his bones crushed by the Horde wasn't so bad, but the Horde being shot dead by a sniper and, worst of all, Dunn being drowned in a puddle were a step too benign. It was a classic Shyamalan twist in its own way, unexpected for sure, but hollow and incredibly underwhelming.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of the most visually stunning animated films ever made, and it's also one that is jam-packed with Easter eggs and incredible visual details. But one that you most certainly didn't notice is actually a clever trick to visualize Miles Morales' clumsy inexperience as a superhero. You see, in the earlier passages of the film where Miles is still learning to be Spider-Man, he's typically shown moving at just 12 frames per second, giving him this sort of jerky look which reflects his burgeoning superhero status at the time. During the Forrest chase sequence, this is juxtaposed with the more experienced Spider-Man, Peter Parker, who moves at a more fluid, assured 24 frames per second. But by the end of the film, when Miles has truly earned the mantle of Spider-Man, he too moves at a fully actualized 24 frames per second. You probably never even notice it just by looking at the film, but your brain likely caught it. It's an extremely smart and innovative way to use visuals to enhance a movie's storytelling.
Spider-Man Far From Home's trio of surprise twists. Marvel Studios had one hell of a task on their plate when it came to selling Spider-Man Far From Home, given that its marketing push began before the release of Avengers Endgame, meaning that the context and setting of its story couldn't be fully explained. But the final film is jam-packed with a ton of surprises beyond being set 5 years after the events of The Blip. For starters, despite the trailers stating that Mysterio was a superhero from another dimension, that's actually not the case at all. And although the movie's producers tried to suggest that Mysterio's villainous descent would be saved for a future film, he of course reveals his true intentions midway through the movie, serving as the primary antagonist for the remainder. In the spirit of the fishbowl-headed illusionist himself, there are two other twists. J. Jonah Jameson makes a shock appearance in the mid-credits scene, played once again by J.K. Simmons, while the post-credits scene reveals that Nick Fury and Maria Hill were actually Skrulls in disguise all along. Given that Far From Home is a fairly inconsequential superhero sequel for the most part, these subversive flourishes helped keep audiences on their toes and ensure that the movie was a little more than just another competent, also-ran Spider-Man film.
Shh, the Octopus. An oldie but a goodie now with 1937's mystery comedy, Shh, the Octopus. Now this film features a fascinating effect which surely must have blown audiences' minds 80-something years ago, where the main character Nanny undergoes a sudden grotesque transformation into a witch in the middle of a scene. While today such an effect could be achieved via VFX with relative ease, such tools obviously weren't available back in 1937, and so director William McGann had to get incredibly creative to pull off such a mind-melting how the hell did they do that effect. Despite the seeming impossibility of executing such a radical transformation in camera so long ago, it actually was completely and entirely practical. You see, McGann used an ingenious technique developed by cinematographer Carl Struss for 1925's Ben-Hur, involving the manipulation of color filters to trick the viewer's minds. For Nanny's transformation, extensive makeup was applied to her face using a single shade of color, after which a filter was applied to the camera lens that matched the color of the makeup, in turn rendering it invisible visible to the camera. Then all it took was for the camera operator to close the filter as Nanny removed her wig, and the makeup would suddenly become visible to the audience. One can only imagine how viewers of the time without easy access to behind-the-scenes information must have felt when they watched this near-literal movie magic play out on the screen.
Laundromat put Meryl Streep in brown face. Apart from duping people into believing that it'd actually be a good film, Steven Soderbergh's Panama Papers drama The Laundromat touted one very peculiar and controversial trick by having Meryl Streep secretly play a supporting character in, quote, brownface. Streep plays two characters in the film. Well, three if you count a brief fourth wall-breaking moment where she plays herself, one of them being a white woman not unlike herself, and the other a Panamanian secretary. Streep dons a fat suit, prosthetics, and has her skin mildly browned up for the part, and though the effect itself is relatively convincing, between Streep's iffy, generically exotic accent and the final moment where she removes her getup on camera, the whole thing just feels a bit, well, you know, racist. Though some might applaud the trick on the merits of its pure effectiveness, ultimately you have to wonder why Soderbergh didn't just, you know, hire an actual Panamanian actress for the part.